This is The Difference Makers, a Paladin security podcast. Each week, we take you inside the world of security for a first-hand look at the inner workings of the industry. But it's about more than just protecting property and manning events. It's about going above and beyond to make the world a safer and friendlier place.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 17 of The Difference Makers. This time around, we have an incredible guest who is super passionate about professionalizing the healthcare security sector. Anjanette Hebert is the Vice President of Healthcare for PalAmerican Security, and she has a very interesting story. Anjanette was originally going to be an accountant, but quickly realized that it was just not the right fit for her. So she switched majors to criminal justice because she found the career opportunities quite intriguing. With over 30 years of experience in healthcare security, she's spent much of her career building an effective and successful security program that started with one mid-sized hospital and grew to a 7-hospital system of now the largest medical center in the region. In this episode, she talks about growth opportunities in a healthcare security setting, finding your purpose in a security career, and how to be successful in a hospital environment. She also talks about how to stand out as a woman in security and the importance of recognizing security professionals at all levels. Hello, Anjanette, and thank you for being here. We're super thrilled to have you as part of the Difference Makers. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's such an honor. So just to get things started, I would love to talk a little bit about Anjanette Hebert. Where are you from, your background, and kind of like, what was your first contact with the security industry or the security world?
So I am from a very small town in South Louisiana where I've spent probably all but 10 years of my life living. It's a little small town called Branch, Louisiana. The closest city to where I am is Lafayette, and that's where I spent most of my career. So I was fortunate to, kind of stumble into the world of security, to be honest with you. I was an overachiever in high school and we all wanted to make everyone proud, and we were going to go to college, and you picked a profession,
right?
And, all of that. And I thought I was going to be an accountant, and that lasted all of like 3 semesters. And I was exposed while I was in college to the world of criminal justice and corrections and security and all those different things. And that somehow intrigued me as well, because I also had an interest in just the law in general.
Right.
And so I dabbled in a little bit of criminal justice while I was in college, changed my major, to criminal justice and, went that way. I did some private security work while I was in college, catching shoplifters in the mall, which is so fun.
That sounds like fun.
It was an experience, and it was very different back then. I'm very aware that I came up in security at a time that's very different than the environment we have now. But we also didn't have the benefit of technology. We didn't have CCTV where we sat in a control room and watched cameras and zoomed them in on a potential shoplifter. We crawled up into a catwalk above the sales floor, and walked across the ceiling, to a little perch where you could watch. So that was the kind of security, that we did way back when I first got started.
Yeah, definitely the world of security has changed and evolved in so many ways. And it's really interesting. So you pursued a major in accounting, and then you quickly realized that it was just not right for you. And then you kind of just met some criminal justice students, and you found that, the subject and the career were kind of like quite intriguing, and you switched majors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was so interesting because as soon as I did that, it's like I found the accounting to be really tedious.
Right.
But I found the whole idea of, whatever it was, law enforcement, corrections, security, I wasn't quite sure, but there was so much to explore there, and I worked in the mall for a while. I did some private investigating for a while, which
that's cool.
Yeah, you would think.
Well, it sounds cool.
It sounds cool. And, oftentimes in my life, people have had that reaction. Oh, that's cool. And my number one comeback has always been, it is not Magnum PI.
Yeah.
By any stretch of the imagination, it is early before the sun comes up, mornings,
Yeah.
parking the vehicle somewhere so it's inconspicuous, making sure all the, if it's a van, it's all covered, blacked out, and now you're in position. You can't move. You cannot move. You cannot leave the van. You cannot let anybody know you are in the van.
Oh,
That
wow.
means everything you need to do has to take place in the van when you're on surveillance. So it gets a little tricky.
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely like in the movies, just parked in a car for long
Yeah,
hours.
and it was hard, and
Yeah.
but there were some parts of it that were fascinating. You do research on a subject. You go to a courthouse. This again back in the day,
Hmm.
paper, big giant books in a courthouse
Yeah.
where you would search for hours and hours and hours trying to find out information about that subject so you could try to find them.
Oh.
That was very, very fun.
Hmm.
Um, but I moved on from that because it got to be, that just got to be tedious as well. Those long hours of just sitting on surveillance
Yeah.
and things like that. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more meaningful. And, totally honest, I answered an ad for a security guard job in a hospital. Um, and that was the beginning, of what is my career today.
That was the beginning of everything.
Yeah, actually it was. Yeah.
I want to talk
Yeah.
about that. Let's talk a little bit about your security journey. Like you just said, you ran into healthcare security, and you have a great beginnings and growth in the United States healthcare security sector.
Yeah. So, my first healthcare security job was, a night shift security officer,
Hmm.
and I did that for a while. And, then I kind of rose through the ranks there, became I was transferred to day shift, and I became the site supervisor. And in that job, as a site supervisor, I
Hmm.
eventually became a manager and started seeking opportunity to learn how to do this job because I quickly realized that I was unique in the hospital setting. There was no one to help me know how to do my job because I was the only one. I wasn't like a nurse leader where I could be mentored by another nurse leader,
Right.
and so that's when I found IHSS, which was just it's almost like a godsend, when you realize you found like this group of people who are so willing to help you
Yeah.
learn, and just so giving of their own talents and their own time, to advance the industry as a whole, and you had an opportunity to be part of something like that, and I got to learn from some of the greats. I mean, I got to learn from Russ Colling. Russ Colling literally wrote the Bible of hospital security.
Hmm.
And I got to actually learn from him. And now I get to work with Tony York, who took the mantle from him to write the latest edition.
Yes.
You know, so that kind of intermingling, within the industry, it's small enough that you can learn from the best. And so it was within that environment of IHSS that I came to know of Paladin.
Right.
When Paladin like came on the scene for me, when I started to meet like this person, oh, where do you work? I work for Paladin. Where do you work? I work for Paladin. Where do you work for? I was like, who's this Paladin thing? Where is this Paladin that I hear of? And it was interesting because I have people that I call dear
Hmm.
friends way before I ever dreamed that I would be part of the PalAmerican or Paladin family.
Yeah.
Because at the time when they became not just colleagues, but friends,
Family.
family friends. I mean, some people who have and currently work for Paladin were instrumental in helping me through some of the toughest times in my own life personally, and that was when I wasn't even part of Paladin, and it was when Paladin didn't have an American presence. And so I always found it intriguing. I was a person that worked my entire career until I came to PalAmerican as what you would refer to as the client.
Right.
I was on the other side of the table and I was quite happy there. I had no interest in jumping over. I loved my job. And so I didn't really have a broader understanding of what the difference is to do the job the way I did or to do this job. It never dawned on me to be interested in that. And so I never thought about, maybe one day I'd work for Paladin, because I didn't think one day I'd work for anybody else.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. Like long time Paladin or PalAmerican clients. A lot of people move to work with the Paladin group or Paladin or PalAmerican, right? It happens a lot.
Well, yeah, I was at my former employer for 28 years when I left.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. So when you've been somewhere that long, you pretty much made a decision. This is where I'm going to be, and then it was just a perfect storm of circumstances, in my life personally and otherwise, that just led to, it's time for me to have something different, and so, I made the decision to leave, and then I had an opportunity to seek a position with PalAmerican.
Amazing.
And, and there you have it.
So this is where Anjanette's history starts with PalAmerican.
Yeah. So it was 2018, like literally my first day on the job was January 2nd, 2018. PalAmerican was very new, just over 1 year. And so at the time, I could literally name you, like I could tell you who was the site supervisor for every client we had, and so I started as what at the time was called the director of healthcare, to help make that transition, because all of the rest of the team responsible for PalAmerican at the time were all Canadian. They were all part of Paladin. And they were trying to expand this into the US.
Right.
And so I came on as, like the American counterpart with the healthcare expertise, to kind of help maneuver the difference in regulation and, training and just the healthcare environment in the US as opposed to Canada. That was what I did in the beginning. I visited, most of the sites, worked with the site supervisors, and just to try to create some kind of cohesiveness, some kind of standardization of how we were going to teach them. I did a lot of review of the training to ensure that it was aligned with American, standards and regulations and terminology and our culture, because Paladin has great training. The content of the training is fabulous, but it doesn't always apply in an American setting. And so we had to make that translation. And so I spent, the better part of my first year going through most of the healthcare related training and trying to make that translation. And then, as we expanded and grew, I became the director of the VP of healthcare.
That's amazing. So walk me through what a vice president of healthcare does. A day in the life of Anjanette.
Because, my first instinct is to say, well, let's see, when we figure that out, we'll let you know. And it is kind of like a standing kind of joke that we have within PalAmerican, because, we still are kind of new. We just celebrated 5 years.
Yeah.
There's, the growth is exponential and the role changes. All of our roles change, on an ongoing basis. So, today I could literally be helping a site that's, struggling with resources to interview and hire security officers. Well, tomorrow I could be helping a site complete their security management plan, or I could be working with a site supervisor who's just struggling in the leadership role.
Right.
A lot of what I do though is be that the company's liaison. If we have like large healthcare clients, for example, and we have a few, where there's multiple sites spread across a large geographic area and they want a single point of contact, then that generally becomes me. And so they have a single point of contact. I'm PalAmerican single point of contact. So when there's an issue that rises to that we can't figure out how to fix this, then I would help to maneuver that.
Definitely. So I want to move the conversation into the work environment. I know PalAmerican has such a unique, strong, and rich culture. So this promotion from within philosophy, it's a philosophy that the company kind of lives by. And I want to know how it helped you develop, I guess, personally and professionally to support your career and become the leader that you are today.
It's all I've ever known, is that it's so important to acknowledge the people who were instrumental in creating the success that your company has. So it's definitely one of the things that aligns with my pre-existing, values and thought processes. Sometimes I think I talk about it all the time. I guess you would call me the executive sponsor of the award and recognition, program. It's kind of my baby.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah, I push it. I make sure it stays top of mind for everybody. One of the things that I learned that humbled me was just because I have, reached certain goals and gotten to a certain point in my career, because I've just been one of those driven kind of people. I wanted to do more. That doesn't mean everybody has that, and there are a lot of people who that security officer job, that security supervisor job, that is who they're going to be. And they are so happy and it brings them joy in that job.
Definitely.
And the last thing I want to do is not acknowledge that. So when you have that person that has found their space, this is what I'm meant to do. And I love it. And I have so much joy in doing it. If you don't recognize what they bring to the table, they're going to take that joy somewhere else. They're going to bring that special sauce to somebody else when you had the opportunity for it to be part of what you were trying to do.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of people in the security industry, there's a lot of career paths that you can take. For example, you can stay in security, or you can pursue a career in law enforcement, or you can pursue a career as a border patrol or as a paramedic. So I'm interested to know, Anjanette, what made you stay in the security industry? Because, with so many career paths, you decided to stay here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, I searched a lot, so like when I was in college, there was a time when I thought I'd work in like corrections. I wanted to rehabilitate criminals, or, I had all kind of lofty goals as a young girl. And I did like an internship with the criminal investigation division where, I was part of like going out on drug busts and things like that. I did ride along with the police department, where we do, all of that. I even got to be part of a robbery in progress response one time,
Oh, wow.
And it's like all of that. I was like, yeah, no, it didn't do it for me. It's like I just didn't feel like there was a purpose for me in any of that. And then I got this job working as a security officer in the hospital in the night shift. And this was at the time a small hospital compared to what it is today. But it didn't take really that long, in the hospital setting to feel like there's a purpose here.
So coming to healthcare security, you kind of found your calling, your passion. So what kind of knowledge, skills, and tools have you gained throughout your experience that impacted or boosted your career? And I guess another question would be, do you still use some of the skills learned today?
Yeah, I think the biggest skill for me that helped me to be successful in a hospital environment was learning how to connect with the clinical team. It's like you can't think of yourself and as security as this separate entity that's going to come in and save them. It's like you really just have to listen, and you have to allow them to know what are the options and to tell you what's going to work for them. Because, one thing I've learned, in security is that there's more than one way to fix it. Not everybody is going to secure the property the same way. Not everybody's going to use the same technology. Not everybody's going to have the same procedures. And the biggest skill is knowing who your champions are. And that's who you collaborate with. So, coming into it, like I said, I grew up in the same hospital. So I think one of the hardest things to do is to come up from, I was a staff person and now I'm your boss. Mm-hmm. And it's equally as difficult, I think, in a hospital where some of the leaders saw you as a staff and then now you're one of them.
Right. And how was that transition, I guess, from field to the office?
Yeah, that was hard. Mm-hmm. It was really hard. Not only was it hard because I came up as a security officer and then I was suddenly, their supervisor, but I was also the only girl. Mm-hmm. So that was stuff. I mean, I had staff, and this is not an exaggeration, who just quit their job because they weren't going to report to a woman.
No way.
And so especially early, I was young. And truth be told, now it's like I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just really ambitious and I was a hard worker, and I had, mentors within that organization around me that saw that I had potential, that I was willing to learn and that I could grow into this job. And I'm grateful that they gave me that opportunity.
That's amazing. So this kind of opens the way to some things that I wanted to talk to you about now that you mentioned that you were so young and a woman in a male-dominated industry. My next question was going to be, being a woman in a male-dominated industry, what do you think are some of the things that have made you so successful in your career and your journey in this industry?
Honestly, I think just the personality that I fall into, it's persistence, and I'm pretty aggressive, and I have a certain amount of confidence, that really does help. It doesn't go all the way, though, and I've not always been successful. There have been times that, I've just been crushed, and, I've felt not heard at all in a room, full of men, where I said something that was not heard, and then someone else says exactly the same thing, and yet they had the greatest idea ever. And it's like, I guess the biggest lesson I learned out of that is you have to time when it's appropriate to call that out.
So how do you feel about, because there is more and more opportunities for women in the security industry, but a lot of them are not even aware that there is or what a career in security can offer. So how do you feel about the opportunities that there are for women in the security industry? How can we encourage more women to get out there and feel supported or even aware of what a career in security can offer?
Yeah, and you're 100% right. When I was very, very early into my management part of my career, and I attended my very, very first conference, I remember it like it was yesterday. I walked into a room, must have been, 25 maybe. And I walked into, this conference room in a hotel, and immediately my heart just sank, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I made a terrible mistake, because it was a room in my 25-year-old voice. It was a room full of old white men. And I was singularly alone. I felt very much out of place. Today, I walk into a room for that same exact event, and that is not the case. And that brings me so much joy. In fact, the last time that I was at that event, there were several of us women that were talking together, and we were commenting on that, how awesome it was to look around and see how many new women's faces we see every year and becoming leaders within the organization. And so, that's awesome. And then I look across, Paladin and PalAmerican, and, we have a fair amount of women in leadership positions in sites, site leaders, department directors, as CSMs, and even, directors of operations. So, you're right. It's awesome. It's not nearly, I mean, we represent half the population, but we certainly don't represent half of the leadership in any, organization, ours included. But it's definitely, a lot better than it has been, and it makes me feel a lot more comfortable.
And that's great to hear. And I guess following to that question, what would be your advice for anyone out there looking to join the security industry, looking to maybe follow in your footsteps on how to get to where you are today? What would be your advice to people out there looking to, either start or grow in the security industry?
I think, a couple things come to my mind, like a couple little snippets. It's like, first, don't limit yourself. Don't say to yourself, I can't do this because of some external force. Well, they don't have any girls there now. There's no women there now, so they won't hire me. That you're limiting yourself. You're putting up your own obstacle. So don't do that. And then the second thing is, don't suffer from a failure of imagination. Just because, like, you want something, but you can't, you can't fit into the mold that it is now. Open your mouth and offer an alternative. And so it's a joint thing. It's an effort on both sides, on our side and theirs. Don't decline a job because they say, hey, well, I have these 12-hour shifts. If you go, look, I really want this job and this is how many hours I can give you. Is there any way I could work a schedule that accommodates this? And you never know. And I think that would be the third piece, is that if you want to get a job and you want to work in security, security is first and foremost a team effort. It is never just about the security officers, and it is never just about you. It's about the group of security officers and how you're going to respond if there's more than one of you, and it's about how you're going to interact with the other people on that site. It's a team effort. So, you have to take that into consideration, that what are your needs as they compare to the needs of everybody else on the team, and can y'all make that work?
Right. No, and that was such a great advice for people out there. Honestly, that was amazing. So moving to your time at PalAmerican, what are the things that you love the most about working at PalAmerican? What inspires Anjanette every day? Has this changed your life in any way? What are the things you take from your work today?
I don't like to be bored, so I've never been a person that would seek out a job that was, the same mundane task that you do day after day after day. So I think that would be the first thing, is that there's so much autonomy in what we do in PalAmerican because of the way that we're structured and the way that we work. And I really like that. And I like being part of building something from the start. When I was presented with an opportunity to be part of PalAmerican almost from its inception, that was what was most appealing to me, besides the fact that I was already enthralled with what I saw as the culture of Paladin, and that was the type of organization that I would want to be a part of, as opposed to some others that I could have had the opportunity to be a part of. So I like that. In the times in my career, where I've felt the most passionate is when I've had the opportunity to be part of building something. And that's what I think we're doing at PalAmerican, that we're building something, and we're in those beginning stages where I have the opportunity to be part of that and make a difference.
Wow, that's amazing. Speaking of building something, I want to put a question here, which was very exciting. I was really proud to see you there. You were in a documentary, Anjanette.
Oh, yeah.
So I saw you in a documentary about Hurricane Katrina and Cajundome City, how it became this mega shelter and basically how the work was exemplary, and it became this security manual of how to manage a mega shelter in this kind of situations, because I think everyone involved did such a great job. And I was really amazed and proud to see you there talking in the documentary. So what was your experience like? Tell me all about it.
Tell you all about it. That would take a long time. But
Yeah.
essentially, at the time that Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005, Louisiana we were in a building stage for the hospital preparedness program, which had been happening for about 4 years. So we had been, receiving grant money from the federal government to develop this infrastructure of planning with the federal government, the state government, local governments, and hospitals and other healthcare entities. And at the time, I was serving as a coalition lead, of a region in the state of Louisiana. So in the state of Louisiana, the state is divided into parishes. Most states are counties. Louisiana's parishes. So we had 7 parishes as part of my region. And we had between 40 and 45 hospitals at any given time that were part of that coalition. So it was my job to coordinate the response to any kind of disaster with those 40 plus hospital entities across the region. And so that could mean what resources they needed, what resources they could share, helping them to shelter in place if that was necessary, helping them to evacuate if that was necessary. Those were all the things we planned for. And then when Katrina happened, it didn't happen to us. We were not impacted by the hurricane in our region. We became the sheltering region. All of those other coalition leads like me, over in the part of the state that was impacted, they were trying to get people out of the city. And we were trying to help them find a place for them to be, and it started out as we were just supposed to be dealing with hospitals, and it ended up we were dealing with everything. And we ended up setting up our emergency operations center co-located with others inside the Cajundome, which essentially became Cajundome City. And so our experience was exactly what you saw. Bus load after bus load after bus load of evacuees who had spent countless days, in floodwaters, on a roof, sitting on a highway, waiting for a helicopter to pick them up, lots of logistics to try to get them where they were. And then we would intake them. And my role was to connect them, to outside medical services, get them a hospital bed if they needed. Once they were finished in the hospital, figure out how to get them back to the shelter. There were a lot of moving parts. And in terms of building something and being part of something successful, that experience is probably, going to go down as the highlight of my career, as one of the most successful teams that I ever got to be a part of.
That is super cool. And a lot of people aren't even aware of what Cajundome City became, and this almost like manual or template of how to handle a mega shelter in those kinds of situations. Now, running to the end of this, tell me, what is next for Anjanette? Where do you want to go? What are some of your short or long-term goals in your security career?
I guess a lot of people at my age would be, starting to think about retirement. I don't really think about retirement in that way. I love what I do and I love being part of this. And, I would love to be able to say, 5 years from now that I'm still part of PalAmerican and, we've achieved a level of world-class security service, in these hospitals that, we're having to turn business away because everybody wants us to do their security. That sounds like hyperbole, but it's really what I want. I see it, and I have a lot of colleagues that I've worked with over the course of my career. And there are a lot of people I know who are as passionate as I am about what we do and want nothing more than to advance this industry, and to have security officers seen for the professional that they are, for the nurse and the CEO equally, to understand that this is a professional asset that needs to be valued and needs to be trained in order for you to get what you need out of it. And if I can play a small part, in helping to advance that knowledge, I will feel like I have succeeded. I want like every person who works in a hospital to understand that security has a role that is part of patient care, and that give us that opportunity to be part of your team. We understand that it's about the patient too, and if we work together as a team with the clinical staff, that we can create a better patient experience and a better employee experience.
Amazing, Anjanette. So just to conclude, and this has been such an amazing chat, is there anything else that maybe I didn't ask, something that you wanted to talk about, something that you wanted to expand on? Feel free. The mic is yours. Is there anything going on with Anjanette right now?
No, I mean, I think the thing I'm most passionate about, like right now as is that reward and recognition program. It's so important to me for leaders to understand that at your level, you may not think that giving somebody a recognition of performer of the month is a big deal. But a security officer, especially one new in their career, just starting, it's a big deal, and it makes them feel seen. And it's important that you let them know, talking about it with each other in an office about how great this new employee is does nothing for that employee. You have to convey that to them. You have to have a mechanism to say, I see the excellent work you're doing. And that's what fed me as a new young security officer, as a new young employee, when I was first coming up, is somebody recognizing the work, even as a new PalAmerican employee. Doesn't matter how old you are, what level you are at your career. You start a new job, you want to know that you're on the right track. You want someone to give you that positive feedback and say, hey, I really like what you're doing here. And then you go, oof, okay, good. I was worried about that. Now I can focus, more on it. And I think sometimes in the busyness of our day, we forget to do that.
Definitely. And it's so important. I think you're doing such a great job with rewarding and recognizing security professionals out there because, they are the real heroes, right? So,
exactly. Yeah.
Anjanette, thank you so much for this. It was such an amazing chat. Thank you for being part of the Difference Makers because you are a difference maker. And I really appreciate all the knowledge you just shared with us. I definitely learned something. I hope that I'm sure that our listeners will learn too. You're such an example. And thank you so much for this and hope to talk to you soon.
Well, I appreciate the invitation and I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjanette. Hey, thanks for tuning in with the Difference Makers. If you want to hear more about the ins and outs of the security industry from real professionals, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Also, check out new episodes on the first Tuesday of every month. Till next time.